Good morning. It's Tom Padula from TomPadulaTV on YouTube and Insegna Booksellers. And this is another one of the world history program presentations, lessons, whatever we want to call it. It's Thursday, the 1st of September 2022. And, officially spring starts today here in Melbourne. Very nice to be here and also to be sharing with you this knowledge of history, which I do with great pleasure. And welcome to Curtis L. Tolman. Good to see you, that you were right on time as I started. Very good. Now, today's program continues along the same lines in a way, because I need to, as time goes by and we have more information, historical information, of course there's so much more to say, and therefore we can only do a little bit at a time. And today is the turn of Alfred the Great, Alfred of England, the one who was renowned in history for his incredible contribution to England, because he did try. His vision was to have one England from the 7 kingdoms that they were there. You know, there were different times then than now. Things were pretty rough, really, and bringing law and order into a kingdom, let alone the whole of England, was quite a feat. But it wasn't always successful, of course, because people are people, and people believe in what they believe in. So the Northmen, the people from the north, believed in many gods, whereas the Christians. Faith, slowly but surely, because of its focus on the people themselves and trying to, be good to the people, was not the way of the northern people. They believed in strength and having fun and all sorts of cultural ideas and practices that the more evangelical Christians were trying to impose, and they did impose it. The niceness, and eventually, when people try to be nice, but it doesn't always work. It's in the short term, brute force wins, but in the long term, it doesn't, for obvious reasons. Okay, so that's one thing. The second point I want to make today is that, as time goes on with these presentations of mine, I'm getting new ideas as well along the way, and I appreciate the fact that quite a few people now are actually coming on to these presentations each week on Facebook. But there is also the YouTube. Now, YouTube gets these presentations as well, but sometimes, a couple of times, some of the programs can't go on for some reason or another, and also because there are so many of them, you can't put them all up at the same time. However, Insegna.com, that's in the blog section, all the presentations are there, one after the other, and if they can't be on for reason or another, it transfers you to the one on Facebook. On Facebook, if you go down my page, all of these presentations are there. But to get to, let's say, to September of last year, there's a lot you have to go through. Because we are in September today, and that's when I started last year. I decided that I would share my knowledge and my professional upbringing, if you like, with at large, free of charge. I'm not going to take it with me, so I might as well do something with it. And that's what I'm doing now. A lot of I've also started to travel a little bit, and today I'm going to continue with my filming and pics from Darwin to down to Catherine, and then to Broome, and then to Perth. I'll show it as much as I can at the end of this hour, depending on the time left. I'll show you a portion of what I filmed as we move along. Always really, it sort of moves in stages, like I do with all this work. Okay, so it's 11:30, and the last, before I start, I just want to say that I remind people that there is also Dante Alighieri, the Divine Comedy, Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso, and on Sunday I'll be doing Canto 10 of Purgatorio, and it's really it's 49 times that I would have done it, and the French and Spanish continuing as well on Fridays. So if you want to follow me, do. It's fantastic, to share this knowledge with you, and the languages and culture, languages and history. That's what it's all about. Okay, let's go. Alfred the Great defeats the Danes. Now we know if you got a Netflix, or if you got other films on television, you get to these the Dark Ages, and then there's the Middle Ages. So we're approaching the Middle Ages slowly but surely. What we have here is around 800 after the birth of Christ, the year 800 onwards to 1000. So Alfred, in England, the Danes did not have everything their own way. They were opposed by the only English king who is called by his countrymen the Great. The Danes were opposed by Alfred. Alfred of Wessex, a grandson of Egbert, most of Alfred's life was spent in leading the fight against the Danes. So Egbert was the king king of Wessex. There were 7 kingdoms in England, and they all lived separately from each other, and they had their own rulers and etc., etc. But they also fought amongst themselves, and they didn't like each other. If they could kill each other or take advantage of one another, they would. But Egbert and then Alfred especially were more religious, and they tried to slowly work towards the vision of one England. But of course, you have to succumb at the other side. The Treaty of Wedmore, 878 AD, after Dominus. Often he had to hide in forests and marshes, but in the end he forced the enemy to accept the Treaty of Wedmore, 878. The Danish leader Guthrum became a Christian, and the Danes agreed to stay to the northeast of a line running roughly parallel with the Watling Street, the old Roman road from London to Chester. For most of the rest of his reign, Alfred had peace, for, as a Danish poet said in England, they got hard knocks instead of shillings, and the axe's weight instead of tribute. So in other words, if you did something wrong, you had your head chopped off. Not much corruption either. They had hard knocks instead of shillings, and the axe weight instead of tribute. So if you did the wrong thing, bang. Alfred, a great scholar. Alfred has often been compared to Charlemagne, for, like him, he was great in peace as well as in war. Though he grew to manhood without being able to read a word, after the defeat of the Norsemen, he became perhaps the greatest scholar in Britain. He decided that, no, I'm not going to use the sword, I'm not going to use knowledge, the power of the word. He translated Bede's history and other great books from Latin into English, and he began the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, the first history of any European people written in its own language. Monasteries and schools were founded, and the king let it be known that he expected his nobles to be at least literate. He expected them all to read, so he could tell them what to do. So after school, when many of the old warriors who had helped to defeat the Danes, sighing, says the chronicles, from the bottom of their hearts, they didn't like it. But because learning is hard, that's why I'm doing languages now. They're expecting people to learn a second language or to improve it as we go along. And, I'm finding with the classes that some of the adults disappear after a few classes. And I know it's not me. It's the fact that I put a bit of pressure on to say, well, it's your duty to learn. I mean, you want to learn a language, that's what you got to do. But if you don't do it, forget it. It's not going to be. You can't blame me. You got to blame yourself. So they say, well, we can't blame Tom for what he says. So we're going to, and they blame themselves, which is a pity, because at the end of the day, it's fun learning another language or doing some history, whatever. Alfred makes better laws and founds the navy. Now, of course, the Danes were famous for their shipbuilding and also for travelling in the northern seas. Alfred the Great also softened many harsh English laws that had remained unchanged from heathen times. I like the word heathen, the heathen times. In other words, the lawless times. And to fight the Danes, he founded the British Navy. Probably no monarch has ever lived who did more to earn the love and respect of his people. It's quite a guy, Alfred. And, I've looked at the Vikings and also The Last Kingdom on Netflix, and then there's the Norsemen. I'm watching them all, and they really take you in. It's incredible. It's incredible. And the same with Ertugrul resurrection. That's from the Turkish Empire, the Seljuk Empire, Turkish Empire, the Crusade. Those times there. English and Danes become one under Canute. After Alfred's death, much of this work was undone, of course. When you die, everything gets thrown away. Boom. What's going to happen to all my books and to whatever I've done? It's all disappear after Tom goes. Boom, boom, boom. Well, never mind. Wars with the Danes broke out again from time to time until in 1017, it's about a couple hundred years later, 150, Canute, King of Denmark, became King of England also, and later of Norway. But by the time the Danes had become less barbarous, by this time the Danes had acquired some knowledge, they had travelled, they moved into the southern lands because they were more fertile, less cold, etc. Canute was a Christian. He married the widow of the English king the Danes had defeated, and did his best to make the Danes and English friends. He succeeded so well that the English and the Danes in England became one people. Forget about where you come from, just let's live together, share the land, do some trade. Welcome to Mariana Casino. Now, the Witan chooses Edward the Confessor. Now, of course, King Canute dies, more kings. 7 years after his death, the Witan, or Council of Wise Men, which advised the Saxon kings, called the throne a descendant of Alfred, known to history as Edward the Confessor. And the Danes had become so much a part of the English people that there were few protests. So Edward became king. He encourages the Normans. So Edward the Confessor was a very religious man who had been brought up in Normandy. But by this time, the Normans, or Norsemen, who had settled in the north of France, had become just as French as their countrymen across the Channel had become English. As the French were more religious and more cultured than the English, Edward brought Norman French favourites to his court and even made a Norman Archbishop of Canterbury. So the Normans sort of became the, the people known. They picked up a lot from the Roman, from Italy, from the Roman Empire. And of course they had Charlemagne, a cultured king who was good in wars and in peace. We shall learn in the next chapter how Edward's successor, Harold from the Witham, chose as the next king, lost his throne to the Duke William of Normandy. So in other words, what happens here, then England gets invaded once again by the Normans. And the Normans were renowned for their feudal system. And as a result of that, all the land in England belonged to the king. And the king redistributed it to his favourites, and they became lords of the manor. In other words, the Lord controlled pieces of land which the king could not or would not be able to manage, administer directly. So I had to do it indirectly. So if I give you this piece of land, what you have to do in times of war, you got to give me so many people to fight, so many soldiers, and you have to give me a contribution if I need it from the work that your villagers do. And they pay their taxes to you, and you give me a portion, It's always like that with people who want to do things on a large scale. Why? Because they want to pick up a little bit from the work of other people. And that's what we do with our government. The government says, well, I give you the roads, the hospitals, I give you the education system, I give you this, I give you that. And what happens is that you have to pay taxes. Now, if you notice, I want to make a bit of just a reflection. If you notice, in Australia today, when the Liberals are in power, you never hear of people doing strikes, right? No strike, very little. You don't hear too many people wanting this, that, and that. Why? Because they are tight. They're not known for being very generous, except for during our last COVID situation, the last couple of years, they were extremely generous in order to overcome the difficulties faced. Okay, now with all that money that's gone out, you have to rebalance the system again. But the pressure is with a Labor government is that the Labor wants to be good to all the people, everyone. They want to be, but you can't, because the cake that you collect is people have to help themselves. So that's where, wages should be reasonable for everybody. People have to live. So the basics need to be had by everybody. And everybody has to contribute, including our Indigenous people. So work has to be done. And everyone, if it's one family, everyone has to contribute. Then everyone benefits. But if you're under a ruler, a more tough individual says, follow me and I'll feed you or whatever, then people say, oh, well, if he doesn't do it, we blame him. Or he has to, I don't know, it's sort of, there is a rebalancing of power in a democratic system. It's not the best of systems from the point of view of government, but it ensures fairness across the board over time. If you elect one government, then comes the other one, and it rebalances things. So now the time of Labor, and we're going to get new ideas, new things, etc., etc. And then when the money, when things become, well, if they are able to manage the economy well, they'll stay on. Otherwise, eventually people will rebel by voting people out. And when the Liberals come in, or the Independents come in, or talk is cheap, doing is hard. Just ask anyone who doesn't know how to cook, who doesn't prepare a meal. Just ask them, can you fry an egg? They don't know. Some people go to the restaurant. but should be able to do it. And that's what history teaches us, to be resilient, to be independent, to look outside of our own immediate needs. And the great people at the top, they have to consider all these elements. And so it's 11:44, time for China. Here we are. I'm going to have a drink first. Zhang Zongjing, I don't know how to pronounce it. Zhang Zongjing, the saint of medicine, and Hua Tuo, the founder of surgery. We're talking about China. In this case here, this is 150 to 219 after the birth of Christ. That's a time when we're looking at. I think you have to look at which dynasty was in power. The Han, I think. Okay, I have to really get acquainted with Chinese history as well. It takes a while. But let's look at what these two people were famous for. Zhang Zongjing was born in Nanyang, Henan province. He devoted himself to the study of medicine after a typhoid fever decimated most of his family. He gathered folk remedies and compiled a work titled Febrile and Other Diseases. Fevers, febrile and other diseases, in 16 volumes. So we're talking about China and, this started there, etc., etc. Well, look at this. This was 2,000 years ago. This guy was already writing about medicine. This medical classic not only recorded many Chinese medicine prescriptions, but also expounded the theories of traditional Chinese medicine. Hua Tuo, 141 to 208. So he was, 60 plus 8, 69 when he died. And the other one was 50 and 19, 69 too. Both of them died at 69 years old. Was born in Bozhu, Anhui province. He was proficient in internal medicine, surgery, gynecology, and pediatrics. He's credited with being the first surgeon in the world to use the technique of general anesthesia, using a concoction called mafaizan to operate on an appendicitis patient with some disinfecting plasters. 1 month later, the patient made a good recovery. He was also an expert acupuncturist and once cured Cao Cao, the renowned prime minister at the end of the Eastern Han dynasty, of a neural headache using this technique. Not bad. Hua Tuo attached importance to therapy. He also emphasized prevention. Prevention is better than cure. Don't wait for it to come, just try to prevent it. He devised a set of exercises known as the 5-animal exercises to strengthen the physique, imitating the actions of the tiger, the deer, the bear, the ape, and the bird. There you are. People who do karate and all sorts of Eastern exercises. These exercises come from Hua Tuo, 2,000 years ago. So they are the 5 animal exercises to strengthen the physique, imitating the actions of the tiger. And what is the tiger famous for? For being very fast. The deer, for looking very elegant and pretty. The bear, is sort of tough, muscles. Yeah. It likes the honey. The ape, and the bird. Okay, so that's these two people, Zhang Zongjing, the saint of medicine, and Hua Tuo, the founder of surgery. Zhang, Z-H-A-N-G, Zongjing, Z-H-O-N-G, J-I-N-G. And Huatuo, H-U-A, Tuo, T-U-O. Look them up. We've got, I actually joined a bit of TikTok lately to see what comes from China. There you are. So thank you, Zongjing, and Huatuo for your contribution to the world. There you are. Okay, so we got this two. Now we go to the Americas now. Now, this part here is it's very technical, but I'm interested in it. Even if I pick up a little bit, please forgive the language. The language is not easy, and they talk about DNAs and look what happens. Environmental changes during deglaciation. When the Earth was full of ice, deglaciation, the ice became water. Okay. Pollen data indicate a warm period culminating between 14,000 and 11,000 years before the birth of Christ. Well, I'm assuming that that's what they're talking about, because they've got a K in front. Afterwards, see a BP, whatever. Cal years followed by cooling between 11 and 10. So there were 3,000 years where it was a warming period, and then another 2,000. There was a cooling period. Coastal areas deglaciated rapidly, the coastal areas, as coastal alpine glaciers, then lobes of Cordilleran ice retreated. So as the ice retreated, it became, water. The retreat was accelerated as sea levels rose and floated glacial termini. So termini means at the end, at the base. So the water was hitting it, and so therefore the ice falls off the mountains and goes into the sea and becomes water. It has been estimated that the coast range was fully ice-free between 16 and 15K. 16 and 15K. What was it? 1,000 years? Cal years, BP, I don't know, before whatever. I'm assuming it's, the period between 15 and 16,000 years ago. Littoral marine organisms colonized the shorelines as ocean water replaced the glacial meltwater. So as the ice melted there, then the plants came on. That's what they called littoral marine organisms. Replacement of herb shrub tundra by coniferous forests. So instead of low-lying shrubs, you get then the coniferous forests, the pine trees, was underway by 12.4, and they've got the dating systems. North of Haida Gwaii, Haida Gwaii, Gwai. Look it up. Eustatic sea levels rise caused flooding, which accelerated as the rate grew more rapid. So the more it accelerated, the more the deglaciation occurred. The inland Cordilleran and Laurentide ice sheets retreated more slowly than did the coastal glaciers. So the ones that were further inland, they didn't have the water melting underneath them, they lasted longer. They are the Cordilleran and the Laurentide ice sheets. Opening of an ice-free corridor did not occur until after 13 to 12K. So 13 to 12,000, about 1,000 years. So in other words, the Cordilleran and Laurentide ice sheets didn't have a cut in them. So before that, people could actually traverse them, go across them. But after they were cut, they became water, they couldn't anymore. And then you've got a mix of ice, water, and you have to travel by boat. So it's a bit more difficult. The early environment of the ice-free corridor was dominated by glacial outwash and meltwater, with ice-dammed lakes and periodic flooding from the release of ice-dammed meltwater. Meltwater is a mix, ice and water. Biological productivity of the deglaciated landscape increased slowly. So biological productivity, in other words, more trees, etc., they grew slowly in these conditions here. Of the deglaciated landscape increased slowly. The earliest possible viability of the ice-free corridor as a human migration route has been estimated at 11,500 years before Christ. Bird forests were advancing across former herb tundra in Beringia. You remember, in Asia and Japan, that's the Beringia part. In response to climatic amelioration, the bettering of climate, in other words, warm, indicate increased productivity of the landscape. So as the warming occurred, then life became more fully evident. Birch forests were advancing across former herb tundra in Beringia in response to climatic amelioration, indicating increased. So that's the birch forests, like, you know, the conifers, the pine trees, different type of tree, but still a big tree. Analysis of biomarkers and microfossils preserved in sediments from Lake E5 and Burial Lake in northern Alaska suggest early human burned Beringian landscapes as early as 34,000 years ago. The authors of this study suggest that fire was used as means of hunting megafauna. So now there is a bit of the chronology. Now, I'm just going to mention this and then I'll go on. I'll finish. Next week we'll look at chronology. But chronology, reasons for and sources of migration. The archaeological community is in general agreement that the ancestors of the indigenous peoples of the America, we're talking about when did they go to America before Christopher Columbus, of historical records entered the Americas at the end of the last glacial maximum, shortly after 20,000 years ago, with a sustained archaeological presence shortly after 16,000 years ago. So they've got evidence between 16 and 20,000. However, there's another thought, another type of thought that says, no, this occurred way before, at least 20,000 years before. There remains uncertainties regarding the precise dating of individual sites and regarding conclusions drawn from population genetics, studies of contemporary Native Americans. So this is a very, this comes from, what do you call it? It comes from studies by the American scientific community. Okay, so that's, where do I get this from? Of course, online. Go for it. Study history. It's so interesting, honestly. After that, we go to our indigenous people. And, you remember we did men and women. Yeah, men and women. And they had different roles. Don't forget, our indigenous people's history before the invasion, what we call the invasion. And as I said, the invasion occurs, people came to Australia many times before Captain Cook, but they didn't stay, and neither did Captain Cook. It was 1788, really, when the first ships came to settle in Australia. And thanks to that initial visit by Captain Cook in 1770, and there were two people of Italian background on those ships. Thanks to Pino Bozzi for pointing it out to me many years ago. And I've become interested ever since, because the Italians here have a presence in Australia, and we claim our presence before. But the Danes, the Danish people in Tasmania, the Tasman from Holland, Denmark, they were here 100 years before, but they didn't stay. So you have to count your presence in Australia from the very beginning when it occurred. And I have a very thick book which was produced in 1788 at the time of 200 years of the settlement of Australia by non-Indigenous people, and which mentions all the groups of people that have come from all over the world. And I think such a study, if you like, could be redone again by our government in order to bring in the idea of the family of Australia being one family, and the obligation which we have to Indigenous people, and also the obligations that the Indigenous people have towards us, people who came later. Because, we don't last as humans. So, we can only hope to live in peace, like Alfred did with the Danes and the English and the Saxons. They all became English. So here we go. This is the final bit about what I was talking about. Finally, after some years and much travelling, those who had left as boys returned as educated men. So the boys were taken around to look at the areas that they lived in. A great ceremony of welcome was put on by each man's own group. In this ceremony, he was reunited with his mother and sisters, whom he had not seen for a long time. These boys who were becoming men. From then on, the young men lived in the bachelor's camp. Each young unmarried man lived apart from his family. They had to learn to survive on their own. When his promised wife was old enough to come to him, or he inherited a brother's widow, Notice that. He moved with her into the main part of the camp. But he was lucky if he got a wife before he was in the late 20s. So marriage or copulating or whatever, wasn't done. He couldn't just do anything. That's probably why the Indigenous people here were less than 1 million when settlement occurred with the invasion. All over Australia, whole continent. Unbelievable. We have seen that a woman's status depended partly on how many children she had. A man's status depended in part on the number of his wives and the number of his children. So a man could have many wives and many children. He didn't have to look after them that much, but he had something to do with them. The really important men of the community were high-ranking in other ways too. They could be good hunters or artists or doctors, sometimes known as medicine men. But the highest status was given to those men who had become religious experts. Religion, belief, things you can't touch. During their lifetime, they learned from the wise elders of the community as much as they could of the philosophy and beliefs of their religion and the laws of behaviour laid down by the ancestral heroes. Now, there was a constitution there. The ancestral heroes had developed certain rules and regulations, etc., and they were told in stories and they weren't written down. So people interpret them as they went along. And they, of course, became tougher and tougher, depending on the personality of the leader. These men were consulted by others for every major decision, like a king. It was they who decided when the great ceremonies should be held. They interpreted the law and decided how lawbreakers should be punished. So there you are. Padre Padrone. For both men and women in Aboriginal society, knowledge meant power and responsibility. Nothing has changed all over the world. Knowledge meant power and responsibility. Welcome to Benny Luchura. Good to see your name again. Wisdom was gained only after long years of practice and study. Men had more power than women, but a woman, especially an old woman, could still gain a high place and be respected by everyone. So that's it about men and women living in... welcome to Angela Imo as well. Okay, now what I've done here is a continuum of the history. So if you want to know more, you can just pick up these lessons as, they're numbered. Each number, when I was looking at, yesterday, I was looking at one of my, I think the 6th or the 7th, and I thought, oh my God, haven't I improved? Because at the beginning, when I first started, I didn't know where I was going. I said, I'm going to go on a journey here of knowledge. And now it's almost a year. Next week, on the 9th of September, I think that's when my first one was on. So it'll be soon, next week, it'll be 1 year that TomPadula has been live on Facebook. It's a big one, because in this time here, I don't know, I'll have to count how many podcasts I've produced so far, and they are very different from each other. They are not, apart from my ramblings, okay, the actual method of moving forward has been constant, and we are, we're in a good spot now. And talking about a good spot, our friend Banjo is here. Jim Carew. Jim Carew. That's the poem that I'm going to read. Let me go. Okay. Jim Carew. Born of a thoroughbred English race, well-proportioned and closely knit, knit of figure and handsome face, always ready and always fit, hard and wiry of limb and thew, that was the never-do-well Jim Carew. One of the sons of the good old land, many a year since his like was known, never a game but he took command, never a sport but he held his own. Gained at his college a triple blue, good as they make them, was Jim Carew. Came to grief, was it card or horse? Nobody asked and nobody cared. Ship him away to the bush, of course. Never do well, fellows are easily spared. Only of women are tolerable few, sorry at parting with Jim Carew. Well, women, are well known for liking naughty, very personable and young men who have got a character, who did the wrong things, in other words. Gentleman Jim on the cattle camp, sitting his horse with an easy grace, but the reckless living has left its stamp in the deep-drawn lines of that handsome face. And a harder look in those eyes of blue, prompt at a quarrel, is Jim Carew. He looks nice, but don't attack him. Billy the lasher was out for gore, 12 stone heavy with a chest of hair. Big boy, bear. When he opened out with a hungry roar, on a 10-stone man it was hardly fair. But his wife was wise if his face she knew, by the time you were done with him, Jim Carew. So Jim Carew was a gentleman. Gentleman Jim in the stockman's hut works with them, toils with them, side by side. As to his past, well, his lips are shut. He doesn't tell them what he did, why he was, brought to Australia as a convict, I suppose. Gentlemen once say his mates with pride, and the wildest cornstalk can never outdo, in fits of recklessness, Jim Carew. What should he live for? A dull despair, Drink is his master and drags him down. Water of Lethe that drowns all care. Gentleman Jim has a lot to drown, and he reigns as king with a drunken crew, singing to misery Jim Carew. Such is the end of the never-do-well Jim the Boozer, all down at heel, but he straightens up when he's asked to tell his name and race, and a flash of steel still lightens up in those eyes of blue. I am, oh no, I was Jim Carew. Now he's a drunkard. That's what happens when you drink too much. You become a Jim Carew. So he was reckless, he was this, he was that. And that applies to all types of drugs, whether it's alcohol or whatever, everything in moderation. But once you overdo it, bang. And I'm glad, in fact, that, the ACT is looking at the drug factor and making it not a criminal offence, but a health one. Where people hate themselves. Come on, do some history, learn a language, do other things that you want to do. And that way you'll get drunk with knowledge. Oh, well, never mind. Now, the drover's wife. Now, poor girl ended up with 4 kids on a farm on her own, and the husband goes on droving around, huh? Well, presumably to make some money. This is the end. I'm going to read it to the end now. And if you want to listen to the whole story, which is 7 pages long, I've got them in the previous 7 or 8 programs of this world history program. It must be near daylight. The room is very close and hot because of the fire. Alligator still watches the wall from time to time. Suddenly, he becomes greatly interested. He draws himself a few inches nearer the partition, and thrills runs through his body. That's the little boy, She calls him Alligator. The hair on the back of his neck begins to bristle, and the battle light is in his yellow eyes. She knows what this means, and lays her hand on the stick. The lower end of one of the partition slabs has a large crack on both sides. An evil pair of small, bright, bead-like eyes glisten at one of these holes. The snake, a black one, comes slowly out about a foot and moves its head up and down. Wow. The dog lies still, and the woman sits as one fascinated. So that's the dog that's putting it's not the child, it's the dog that wants to catch the snake. The snake comes out a foot further. She lifts her stick, and the reptile, as though suddenly aware of the danger, sticks his head in through the crack on the other side of the slab and hurries to get his tail around after him. Alligator, that's the dog, springs, and his jaws come together with a snap. He misses, for his nose is large and the snake's body closed down in the angle formed by the slabs and the floor. He snaps again as the tail comes round. He has the snake now and tugs it out 18 inches. Thud, thud comes the woman's club on the ground. Alligator pulls again. Thud, thud. Alligator gives another pull, and he has the snake out, a black brute 5 feet long. The head rises to dart about, but the dog has the enemy close to the neck. He's a big, heavy dog, but quick as a terrier. He shakes the snake as though he felt the original curse in common with mankind. The eldest boy wakes up, seizes his stick and tries to get out of bed, but his mother forces him back with a grip of iron. Thud, thud, the snake's back is broken in several places. Thud, thud, its head is crushed, and Alligator's nose skinned again. She lifts the mangled reptile on the point of her stick, carries it to the fire and throws it in, then piles on the wood and watches the snake burn. The boy and the dog watch too. She lays her hand on the dog's head, and all the fierce, angry light dies out of his yellow eyes. The younger children are quieted and presently go to sleep. The dirty legged boy stands for a moment in his shirt, watching the fire. Presently, he looks up at her, sees the tears in her eyes, and throwing his arms around her neck explains, "Mother, I will never go driving. Blast me if I do." And she hugs him to her worn-out breasts and kisses him, and they sit thus together while the sickly daylight breaks over the bush. Beautiful, the drover's wife. And they end up killing the snake, 5 feet long. And that's the first story I've read of Henry Lawson here. The next one is called The Bush Undertaker. Let me see, it's just as long. These are short stories. Marisa Francavilla, welcome as well. I've just done Henry Lawson. And the next one will be The Bush Undertaker. So we just finished The Drover's Wife. You can look it up, Henry Lawson, The Drover's Wife, and you can pick it up from your iPhone or phone or computer, whatever you want, as long as it's online. Or better still, get yourself a book by Henry Lawson. I don't know, I have to check these two. I love them. I want to make them available as well, but you know, I haven't done it yet. I will do it as we go along. That's 12:15. We've done it all, and now it's time for me to go to Darwin. And here I am ready, believe it or not. After the last few weeks of difficulties that I've had, I'm getting a bit better at this, so we'll see what happens. Okay. So we are in Darwin. We went to see the museum. We went to see the Indigenous Museum, and then we were about to catch the bus. So I'm going to go to the bus now. That's where we left off last time. Here we are. There we are. That's the bus that we took, and we went then to the next little activity, which was, this was on the way. That's boating place. You know, I catch anything that goes along. Okay? And this was, then we ended up here, it's called Fanny Bay. And it looks to Darwin from there. See that from afar? And that's my selfie. Well, and that's with Angela, the person who organised it all. Nice. Now, the next one, I think I took a bit of a clip here. The two of us said, let's stop here so that you can take some photos. I'm going to take a bit of a pic. Look at this. Darwin in the distance. My sister taking photos. Take a bit of video. Yeah, and a bit of video as well. Look at this. And the commentary as well. Of course, we all want to take a bit of video. So we go to the next one, and here I will give it to you.
Actually, this is called Fanny Bay.
Fanny Bay, yeah?
Fanny
Bay. The lady here taking the video. There we are.
It's a video.
There we are.
Yeah.
We're all doing our bit for Darwin.
The weather is just absolutely fantastic.
It is. Not only that, but I think that eventually Darwin is going to be as big as Melbourne.
Waters.
What a life. There we are, and then we have to go back, of course. And where do we go after this? That's my sister there. And there we are. And this really attracted me. Look at this this tree. Look at those. But to get I think get a better picture here. Beautiful. Yeah? Come on. Trying to catch. See that? These are the ones. See that? They look like beans on a tree. Amazing. And I was asking whether you could eat them or whatever, but They're like carube, you know, in Sicily, but a different type. There they are, look at that. That's up north. That was the, I think, I can't remember, it was Michael or Paul, the bus driver. And we're coming down. And we got to the casino, this part of the casino. That's the entrance. That's one of the inner corridor. And this was the pool at the back of the casino. It didn't take much, because we only stayed probably not even an hour. But I thought I'd go back and put my feet into the water, which was very nice because it was hot. There you are. Oh, this was one of the pictures from for learning Italian here. Never mind. We'll go to the next one. Here we go. This was now along the way. Okay, look how beautiful it is, huh? The northern part of Australia, Darwin, or thereabout. And it's, what do I say here? Wait a minute. No. I asked the guy whether I could speak in the language, and he did for me. Here. Which language is it? Which language is it?
Malara.
Which language?
Malara.
Malala. And what is your name?
Bill.
Thank you very much for letting me film you. Okay.
Yep. Thank you, bud.
Thank you. Bye. And of course, I left something for him. He's an artist, and they make a living out of that. And this is now the market near the sea, the Sunday market. Nice place. There we are, a few people from the bus. Nice one. Good picture. Popcorn. Now this was the beach. Look, and then we wait for sunset here. I had to wait quite a while. The sun was. So look how many people are. It's incredible how many people there were. So we went back and looked at more things in the market. There you are. I bought a few things to remember the place by. Interesting. And this was too large. I wanted to buy a couple, but then, you'd ruin them. So I didn't. I bought smaller ones. Didgeridoos. Also other works. There you are. More art, very particular. And this was interesting too. Various stones from the north, made into beautiful. And this was waiting for sunset. Went to find a spot, the first part of sunset as it moves. No, oh, look at that. That's a good one. Here. Look how many people. Here we are, sunset in Darwin. Look at all these people here coming to see it. Amazing. So many people now. And there's also the lady here taking a video. And the other ones.
All is good. There's a nice gentleman here taking a
Yes. Beautiful experience. Wonderful. More pictures. Then go back a bit more. Oh, here. Sunset in Darwin, starting with a beautiful picture. Oh, the lady bought this, I remember. Oh, the guy. And look at all the people here. What an amazing sight.
Incredible, isn't it? Half of Darwin must be here.
Amazing sight. Look at the people.
I'm going to add more and I can't. Add more saying. Sorry, mate.
There's a special lady here.
You need to get it on the side. What? You need to get it on the side.
There you are. What a beautiful idea. Look at the people. My God. There's my sister there. Coming down.
I want to go right down to the shore and get home.
Coming down. The sunset is almost here.
I'm walking down to the shore.
Oh, the phone is mildly waterproof.
And the sun goes down. Beautiful. Yeah. Almost there now. I thought, Angela, let's take a move. Oh. Well, this is actually the setting of the sun here in Darwin. We have a bird flying over. From afar, we're going to go close up. Close up. Look at the sky. Oh my gosh, how beautiful it is. Amazing. Just a little watch here. All the people. Too fast, Tom. And the sun is set. Big applause. Okay. was it when you turn around. And I have to take the moon. That's the moon. And here we went to dinner. So it took, there we are. This was the place, this across, and this was our dinner for that night. Plenty of food. Buffet. Look at that. That's a nice. That's it. I think I'll leave you with this picture here. There, that one there, because the other one was from overseas. Okay, so that's it. And what do we do after this? I'll show you. After this, I'll have a look. Now after this, we're going to go, then the next day, we go to watch, next week, if you want to watch, we go to the crocodile place. Next week, when I do it next Thursday, you're most welcome to come back and watch this. It's quite interesting, the trip, and I recorded quite a lot of it, the details of it. Quite interesting, really. And I thought I'd do something for Australia as well. Darwin was fantastic. Loved it. The Darwin experience, especially the sunset. It remains with you. So we're 12:30 now. We've done quite a bit today, and I'm very happy that for people who come on. Thank you very much to Giovanni Chancha as well for coming on to watch Australia. As I said, the next, the weeks after this, we're going to do this trip. So at the end of my presentations, part of my contribution for Australia. And I might just look at Australia, the Western Australia as well, and, show you how big the place is, really, and how many kilometres. We did about 4,000 kilometres by bus. So it's quite a lot. Okay, thank you very much once again for coming on. Anyone who comes during the week, thank you very much to you too. Spread the word. This is interesting. We're doing quite a bit, and eventually, as it moves on, we'll cover other parts of the world. We don't want any of the world to be left behind, including Antarctica and the North Pole and Africa. The places which I haven't touched on, I will in time. And thank you. Okay, my pleasure, Marisa, for sharing it. My real pleasure. That's what I want. Ok, grazie mille. Adesso finiamo. We'll finish now. This is Tom Padula from TomPadulaTV on YouTube, and of course, Insegna Booksellers. Don't forget to come and buy some books. It'll help me maintain the ship. Okay, ciao. Oh, you can also donate. It all goes towards general revenue. Bye-bye.